Dan, as Tris has just been saying, the way he fights now, it's almost like he's trying to prove his durability every single time he's in the ring. Has he got it in his makeup to change that outlook and to fight in a more mature way? Do you think he can at last learn from the lessons that have been dished out from when he's turned pro, really?
Well, after he moved to train with Freddie Roach a couple of years ago, he seemed to have made that adjustment to start boxing in a more sensible way, rather than standing there flat-footed trying to slug it out, which is what he was tending to do, maybe against a lower level of opposition. But the problem is maybe in a big fight he just reverts to type. Maybe that's in his makeup, in his fighting DNA. He's just so desperate to prove himself, he just can't stop doing it in the heat of a moment. When you're in there with a really top-class fighter, a really good fighter who's throwing bombs at you, you just go back to your instinct, and his instinct seems to be to stand there and trade, to try and prove himself. It's a mistake, but it could be hard to change it now.
I think that was one of the things that people noticed in the sparring footage from Sky at the time. And I mean, he was sparring, from what I understand, novices in the wild card, and he was getting involved in complete tear-ups with them. There was shots of him, film footage of him getting nailed by right uppercuts, left hooks, and every shot in the book, and really getting shaken by these guys, and just having all-out wars in the gym. And when you look at longevity and trying to, and also it's not just about longevity and getting involved in fights, but it's about winning fights. Ultimately, it's about winning. And to do that, Khan's best chance is to use the assets that God gave him.
Yeah, I mean, I remember Terry Norris, and he was going through some slugfests, and his animal instincts would get the better of him. But ultimately, he managed to tailor his style to stay out of danger. I mean, you mentioned that Khan has got to do this. Do you think he will?
I'm not sure he will actually now, no.
Right, okay. Interesting.
It'll be very hard to change at this stage of his career. He's only 25, he isn't that old. He turned pro quite young, at 18 or 19. He's been boxing for a long time, since he was a kid. It's very hard to change what you know and what's been successful for you. He needs a complete rethink, maybe even changing your team and your trainers, your advisors, your friends, your sparring partners. It's a massive, massive change.
Yeah, well, I mean, there has been a lot of talk about Freddie Roach, who initially was thought to have turned Amir's career around, but now he's almost a scapegoat. Do you think he should move on? Is it a good move for him to move away from who is widely regarded as the best trainer in the business?
I think the issue is that Freddie's a very busy person, and Amir wants to be the #1 in the camp, and that's not going to be the case as long as Freddie's got Manny Pacquiao. I think Manny Pacquiao made something like 28 million for the Timothy Bradley fight, and Freddie should have got 10% for that. I hear that Amir made $950,000 for last weekend, and 10% of that obviously is nowhere near what he'd make with Pacquiao. I think what's interesting, Dan, is when you look at changing styles and people who've adapted, I think both Lennox Lewis and Vladimir Klitschko have done that under Emmanuel Stewart. Funnily enough, Emmanuel Stewart does like his fighters to have a bit of a war, but where they learnt from their mistakes and their fragilities, they teamed up with Emmanuel Stewart and became more safety first. Too safety first for Emmanuel on many occasions. But it's interesting the names being linked with Amir now, Nazim Richardson and Emmanuel Stewart, and I think maybe it could be time for a change. I just think if Freddie's laying out the game plan and Amir's not following it, is the respect there? Is the respect still there? If your trainer's telling you to do something and you're doing something completely different, what does that tell you about their relationship?
What do you think is next for Amir Khan? Do you think he should stay, look for another world title fight, or do you think he should drop down a level?
Well, it could come down to a change of weight. I mean, he was always very tight at lightweight before he moved up, when he got gymmed by Prescott. I'm sure he must be fairly tight at light welterweight, even though some people are saying, well, he's not that big as a welter. Maybe, but the fact, I'm sure he's 5'10", he's quite long arms, got a big frame for light welter. Maybe he can move up to welter. The problem there is that the welterweight's going to punch even harder than the light welters. So whichever weight he fights at, they're going to have to match him very, very carefully. But that's what boxing is about, a large part of it is about, just picking the right fights against the right opponents, in the right venues, the right country. Just have to be very, very careful with Amir Khan, whoever trains him now, whichever weight he boxes at, just pick the right opponents.
Tris, there was in the aftermath, it was what went wrong with Khan, what went wrong with his build-up. There's a danger that we're not giving Danny Garcia the credit for this. Let's not forget he went in there and he knocked Amir Khan out in 4 rounds, and it was a sensational display. How good is he?
I don't think he's great. I really don't. I mean, he was good on the night, did exactly what he had to do. And I mean, the amount of pressure on his shoulders that his dad puts on him is insane. And for someone to cope the way that he does is amazing. You know, he can laugh off his dad's boast, but you know, that puts a lot of expectation onto him. But I think we've almost seen Danny Garcia's limits exposed sometimes by, you know, he struggled by Morales for a long time. This is an ancient, battle-worn Morales, not battle-hardened, but battle-worn, shot-worn Morales. He was pushed to the wire by Ashley Theophane, which, you know, no disrespect to Ashley, but when you're talking about people being excellent champions, excellent world champions, I don't think you're going to be looking at Garcia in the mould. I think, and you know, it's a dangerous division. There are better fighters than Garcia, and more rounded fighters than Garcia in the division, but you know, none of this is to take away from what he achieved on Saturday night, because he went in there as the unbeaten champion, said that he would win, and he did, and credit to him for doing it, because he did it in an exciting manner.
Dan, who would you like to see Garcia in against next?
Well, really there's some talk of fighting Morales in a rematch. I know Morales wants that fight because, well, maybe he thought he was robbed last time. It was fairly close. But would Garcia want to go over old ground again and fight Morales again? I'm not really sure, because even if you beat him again, people would say, well, you beat him the first time. Plus Morales is just even older than he was the first time. He's a great name, but he's no longer really a top-class fighter. Maybe Garcia wants something else. But the thing is, he's backed by Golden Boy, so he has plenty of options. They can pick and choose which opponent they want. He's in a good position now.
I think Garcia will be involved in some fun fights. Unfortunately, as Dan mentioned, he's with Golden Boy, which isn't bad in many respects, but a couple of guys I'd like to see him fight for top ranks. So you've got Mike Alvarado, who I think he'd have a fun fight with. I think Brandon Rios, I think they could have a cracking tear up at light welter. But obviously they're on the other divide of the Cold War, as it were. But the fight I think I'd really like him to have, I mean, obviously it all depends on what's going on with Peterson's drug appeal and everything else, but I'd love to see him fight Lamont Peterson. I think that's a really good logical match between two good fighters, gets Peterson a chance to get his belts back. But I mean, we don't know what's going to happen to Peterson. He could be out for months and months and months.
Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of talk afterwards about Amir Khan getting a rematch with Danny Garcia on British soil, and Garcia apparently said he'd agreed to that. It's not the first time that a fighter has agreed to a rematch in the heat of the moment after beating a champion. But if it was made, and it's highly unlikely, if it was made, who would you pick, Khan or Garcia in a rematch, Dan?
Garcia again, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, in the end, the result was conclusive. He floored him 3 times. Yeah. As we know, Khan doesn't take a great punch, even if he isn't actually chinny. He doesn't hold a great shot, so Garcia beat him with big punches, lefts and rights. I mean, I can't really see the result being any different. It might go a few more rounds. Khan might stay out of trouble for 6, 7, 8 rounds this time, but Garcia will go into the fight knowing that he has a punch to hurt Khan and knock him down and stop him. So even if he went into the 10th, 11th or 12th round, Garcia would know that he could win at any time. So I'd go for Garcia.
Tris, do you give Khan a better shout in a rematch?
Yeah, I'd still pick Khan. I picked Khan last time, I'd pick him again. It's very difficult with rematches because you never know. Sometimes someone's just got an opponent's number, and that could be the case with these two. But I think Khan could see, you know, he can see the tape of where he was going right and where he went wrong. And I mean, where he went wrong, it wasn't that he just walked onto a punch. He was there and he stayed there on the inside, and that's not where he needs to be fighting. And so I think he could learn from that and come back and outbox Garcia. I really do. But I personally, I wouldn't like to see Khan go back in at that level. I'd like to see him nurtured a little bit and given almost a gimme fight on an undercard, you know, before Christmas, and then start to rebuild next year. But I don't think that will happen. It sounds like Golden Boy are really happy with the fact it was such an exciting fight, and they'll probably look to put him on the top of the bill against someone else. But you know, I don't know that that's necessarily the way forward from here.
We've got a new forum on the BN website, forum.boxingnewsonline.net, where we talk about Hay and Chisora, we talk about Khan and Garcia, the implications of the fights and where they go next. An interesting thread on there at the moment is dream fights, and it's always fun to pick fighters from certain eras. Now there's 3 fights on there which catch the eye at the moment. We've got Diego Corrales against Arturo Gatti at super featherweight, Evander Holyfield, one of my favourites, against Michael Spinks at cruiserweight, and Aaron Pryor, I know a big favourite of yours, Tris, against Manny Pacquiao at light welterweight. Okay, let's just briefly, just to finish off, Dan, Corrales, Gatti, who wins and why at super featherweight?
I would say Corrales, because Corrales' biggest lone defeat at super featherweight was Floyd Mayweather. Mayweather's a complete different style from Arturo Gatti. Mayweather picked and poked his way with counterpunches against Corrales. Well beat him, floored him 5 or 6 times. It was a big win for Mayweather. But Gatti would be totally different. He would just steam into Corrales, and that would be perfect for Corrales, who was very tall for super feather, had long arms. He would just pick Gatti off and pick him apart.
I think Dan's right. I think a lot of it's down to dimensions. I mean, Gatti's heart means he'd be probably climbing off the floor several times, but Gatti took a lot of facial damage as well, and with those long limbs and the long jabs and long straight right hands and the hooks around the side, you could see Gatti getting busted up. But it just being an all-out war, Gatti non-stop, plugging away, coming forward, round after round, bloody face. Maybe he'd have his own success against Corrales, maybe even downstairs to the body, or trying to work his way in. And I think it would be a fascinating affair. But it would just be it would be a non-stop highlight reel. But I think the dimensions and Corrales' height would give him the edge.
I think I'd favour Corrales, but at super featherweight, that was where Gatti had those highlight reel come from behind knockouts. So you could never write him off, could you, in a contest like that? Okay, next off, this is an interesting one for me. Evander Holyfield, who universally recognised, no real competition for the best cruiserweight of all time. How would he get on if Michael Spinks had a little stay at cruiserweight?
I think Evander Holyfield wins this one pretty convincingly, not comfortably. It could be a horrible fight, because Spinks had a very awkward style, bounding around the ring, can make anybody look bad, apart from Tyson when maybe he didn't really fancy it. But Holyfield wasn't quite the explosive puncher Tyson was. It could take a few rounds to get going really, but you fancy Holyfield later on, I think.
Yeah, to stop him, would you think?
I think so. He'd wear him down and maybe have him floor him a couple of times, and the referee would stop it in maybe 8 rounds.
Yeah. Trace, what do you think is interesting?
Yeah, agree with Dan again. Holyfield, but on points, I think he'd outwork him. But again, you look at Holyfield, hasn't always been the hardest person to hit. Spinks had that big right hand, Spinks jinx. So, it could be another fight like the one we just mentioned, where each fighter's climbing off the deck and jostling for position until the final straight. But I think Holyfield's work rate would probably give him the edge, certainly over 15 rounds too.
And that brings us to the end of BNTV episode 6. And don't forget, you can read about David Hayes' win over Derek Chisora, Amir Khan's loss to Danny Garcia in this week's Boxing News. Available online, boxingnewsonline.net/apps. Also get involved in the forum, forum.boxingnewsonline.net. We'll see you next week for BNTV episode 7.
Subscribe today to Boxing News. Pay less than £1.92 per issue. Never miss out. You'll be guaranteed every issue. Fast and free delivery direct to your door. Be the first in the know. We're the world's only weekly boxing magazine. For more information on how to become a subscriber and for all our great offers, please visit our website today, www.boxingnewsonline.net.